evening, everyone. All right, great. Today we are going to look at literature review. One of the areas that is very important, an area that is very important, yet an area that does not receive much attention, both from the scholars as well as students doing their thesis. And we are going to see why perhaps we need to think a little bit more about this area and more seriously. And sometimes the thesis may get strong or become weak depending on how well we have done our literature review. So literature review is very central, not only to chapter 2, but also to the whole thesis. And today we're going to look at how what is literature review? Do we have, why do we do literature review? How do we do it? And how can we do it in a way that, can help us, write better theses or better documents, because you're not going to stop writing after your thesis. You're going to publish. You have to publish as doctoral students. And therefore, I welcome you to our session this evening. And should you have any question, write it down somewhere, and we shall have a Q&A, questions and answer session towards the end of our today's class. So without further ado, I want us to get into the business of the day. And today we are going to talk about literature review. Now, what is literature review and how should we understand literature review? Of course, different people will define this section differently. But whenever we think about literature review, most of the people think about reading a lot of material and writing a lot of things about their area of study. But how do you do this reading? How do you get the literature? What literature is the right literature? How do you get that right literature? And when do you know that you have written enough or you have reviewed enough literature? These are some of the questions that bother many of our students when they are writing literature review. And it is my hope that, that after today's class, most of you or all of you will be able to write a better literature review papers, even journal articles published on peer-reviewed journals, papers based on literature review, and of high quality. So let me first of all begin by defining literature review. And usually we say that literature review is a systematic examination of scholarly work. And, and not just every scholarly work. You have to focus on a certain topic. So when you're focusing on this work, you're not just looking at it or reading this literature the way we read novels or something like that, but you're critically evaluating this work, you're critically analyzing this work, and then you're going to bring together knowledge from different scholars, different fields, and synthesize these findings, whatever you are looking for. If you're looking for to synthesize the findings, the methodology, the approaches, or whatever you're doing, then in reviewing the literature, the writer then should present a very comprehensive and critical and accurate understanding of the current state of knowledge. What we are saying is that we expect you to be the most knowledgeable person in your area when you're doing your defense. Why? Because you have done a comprehensive literature review. And literature review also involves comparing different research studies. It involves looking at how did people do it in US, how did people do it in Asia, how did people do this kind of a thing in Africa, and then so what? What does that mean to my work? Where does that leave me? Does it reveal any gap? For instance, if you are you study strategies of dealing with various psychological issues that affect people, you may want to look at how do psychiatrists for instance, in US deal with this type of trauma? How do psychiatrists or counselors in Asia deal with this kind of trauma? How do the African psychiatrists or psychologists deal with this kind of trauma? And so what about my study? Do we have any gap in the current literature, something that perhaps is not well explored? So this is what literature review is all about. And today, my task is to try and take you, by and by through this process of doing the literature review and in a way that meets the standard that are even publishable. So in general, we have two types or two major categories of literature. The first category, we call it standalone review or literature review. And now this is a kind of a self-contained document that you set to write, and it comprises extensive review of literature, very comprehensive, and it provides a very broad overview of current knowledge about a particular topic. Now, when we say standalone, we are talking about a paper that you can actually write, purposefully write for publishing, literature review for publishing. And we shall look at different types of literature review. And the standalone literature review begins with some set research questions that you want to answer, and then you review literature to understand how have the other scholars approached this issue, and how what does that tell you as far as your research questions are concerned. Do you get answers to the research questions that you had set to answer? Then we have the most popular, and I believe the one that concerns you most, and we usually call it embedded literature review. And this kind of review is integral part of a study like your dissertation or a thesis, and it serves as the context for the issue being explored. So if you are looking at the issue of suicide, then we, for those who are in psychology, for instance, we expect that you will have done comprehensive literature review that will inform even your objectives, that will inform the other parts of that document. That type of literature review is called embedded review. Now, let's talk about what is expected of you as a PhD. I'm not sure whether all of you are doctoral students, but just for the sake of it, because a number of us here are colleagues, we teach and we are teachers, faculty in our own universities. So when you tell students in your undergraduate classes to do literature review, what do you expect? Most of the time, we expect that they can do a very simple task, essentially very descriptive and, topic focused, and mostly indicative of the main current source of the topic and analysis of the topic in terms of justification, who said what, where do they come from, and so on. So it is very descriptive. We do not expect them to do so much analytical work at that level. But when it comes to master's students, whether it is Masters of Science or whether it is a Masters of Philosophy, and they are doing literature review, at this level, for those who are teaching master's students, we expect them to exhibit analytical skills and also to be able to summarize issues and covering methodological issues from different scholars. They should also be able to analyze, for instance, or to review techniques, research techniques and topics, and possibly two literature-based chapters, one on a methodological issue which demonstrate knowledge of advantage or disadvantage, another on theoretical issue relevant to the topic, the main topic or the problem. So at this level, what I'm trying to say, we expect the students to show some more analytical skills and also ability to summarize what they have read and capture the essence of what they wanted, or the essence of the questions they were answering. Now, at PhD level, which concerns most of you, this is the highest level, of education, and we expect students to exhibit, one, critical thinking and analytical thinking, and the ability to cover literature, broad literature, number of publications, and be able to not only to summarize but to synthesize and show ability to get deep in terms of synthesizing this knowledge and coming up with arguments and looking at this knowledge not only from the face value but also from the philosophical assumptions and foundations underlying the literature that you are actually reviewing. So this is a high level of literature review, and that's why it is important for us to have this kind of a class so that we can understand, okay, for us to get to that level, what should we do? How should we do it? Then for us to get to that level of analyzing literature, then it is important to understand the purposes of literature review. Why do we do literature review? Now, from my review of literature on how to write literature review, three major purposes are the most common why people do literature review, and my discussion is going to revolve around these the purposes. Purpose number one is the purposes that set the context for the study. You may review literature when you want to set the context for your study. I'm going to elaborate in a moment. Number two is purposes that inform the research design and the methodology. So you may want to review literature when you want to understand what kind of research design you want to do, or the methodological approach or design for your study. And the third type of literature review, or the third purpose, is the one that you identify the area for advancing scholarship in the field. So let me start with the first one. Now, you may do literature review for the purposes of setting the context for your study. And how do you do this? Number one, you may want to look for, you may want to place the topic within the contemporary context and demonstrate knowledge of the state of art development in relation to what is happening currently. Where would you place your study? Number two is to recognize influential researchers that scholars in seminal studies that have shaped your field and study. Definitely, for every area that we have picked for thesis, there are some influential scholars, and the only way we know that you are well informed about your area is, for instance, the ability to name a few scholars who are renowned in that area. In fact, this question becomes very serious. You may find it actually, you may get it actually during your defense. One of the examiners may ask you to name 5 main scholars or very influential researchers in your area of study. So that is one way that we know that you are well informed about your area. Number three is, to set up a theoretical framework for your study and contrast perspective, ideas, and approaches. Yeah, again, this helps you to contextualize your study in terms of theoretical framework. Which theoretical framework is most suitable for your study? And how does it compare with other theoretical frameworks or other perspectives? What makes it more suitable or most suitable for your study? And number four is to state the topic within the historical background of your research area. Of course, most of the things that we are researching on, and you're not the first one, most likely to research, that area, has come a long way. You may want to go back and understand that topic from a historical point of view. Where would you state your topic? Are you in, critical theory as far as the way the philosophical assumptions, underpinnings have come along, where would you street your study? Are you in structuralism? Are you in critical theory? Where are you? Where would you place your study? I don't know the historical background of your studies, but the kind of context that we are talking about here is one that will help you to talk very clearly about how the topic that you're studying has come along as far as history is concerned. You can actually tell somebody about the way your area of study has developed since the early 20th century. So number 5 is clarify and define terms and key concepts used in the context of your study. We do literature review with this purpose also. Sometimes we have very, very complicated concepts or terms that we are using in our study. For instance, if you're doing a study about democracy, exactly what does democracy mean and to whom and for what reason? So democracy has evolved, and therefore when you start talking about democracy in your study, then we expect that you have really reviewed the definition and the meanings, different meanings of this concept as it has evolved over time. Number 6 is discuss current debates, controversies, and questions. This is actually one of the most important aspects of literature review. You should be able to highlight at least the current debates. What are people saying if you're doing a study about sexuality? What are the current debates about sexuality? What are the current controversies about sexuality? What are the current unanswered questions about, sexuality? This is a very important part of literature review. And finally, as far as the purposes that set the context for the study are concerned, I found that one other most important thing is to identify relationship between ideas, theories, and their practical implications. Now, this is also very important. Sometimes we have concepts, we have ideas, we have theories, but how do they relate? What are their practical implications? You are going to get this as you review literature. So you can review literature, or you should review literature with a name of getting either all of the ideas that I've talked about or some of them. Now, you can also do another type of literature review, or still incorporate in the document. If you're doing a padded literature review, you can also do it with another purpose, and this is the purpose that informs the research designs and methodology. For you to understand the best methodology, the best design for your research, you need to do some literature review. And this kind of literature review will help you to know or to narrow the research problem and make it feasible and doable within your context and constraints. Now, sometimes we go into we start writing our thesis proposals, and whatever we are proposing to do actually cannot be done. It's so broad. So the best way to handle that is to review some more literature to understand whether it's your problem that is so broad, and you narrow it down in to make it feasible and doable. Some of the things we propose cannot be done. They are good, yes, but they cannot be done. They're just so complicated, or they're just so broad. It's like you want to change the whole world. You cannot do that. So read a little more, review literature, and you know whether your problem is broad or your problem is okay. The other one is to uncover methodologies and instruments that may help you design your own study, develop your data collection and analysis strategies. I do this a lot. Sometimes I do review journal articles or theses or publications to understand how people studied a certain phenomena. You'll find it interesting. If you do not do this, you might start working on a document, only to realize that the kind of research, the kind of methodologies, the kind of instruments you have suggested cannot actually be used for this kind of a study. So for you to be confident to be right, so that you don't waste the time, review literature to understand the methodologies and instruments that others have used, and also you can now adopt the same for your studies. Then number three is it will help you to identify and critique methodological assumptions and research techniques employed in previous studies. I think that one is pretty clear. You'll be able to identify and critique methodological assumptions and techniques employed in previous studies. And number four, it will help you to refine the focus of your study, even modify the topic of your research. Most of the time, you'll find that the more you review literature, the more you'll be able to narrow your research problem and also refine the focus of your study and even modify the topic. So you do that because you have understood how others have looked at the same issue, and now you're able to put yours appropriately, and you focus on a more feasible area and doable research problem. Then the other one is prevent intentional duplication. I thought this one is pretty clear. We also do literature review to avoid a situation where you are doing a study that is already on the shelves of one of the universities, or it has been done in your area or even in your country. But also beyond preventing an intentional duplication, we also do literature review, to help you get alternatives and also extend existing research. You may find that somebody else has done a study on a certain issue. They have looked at, the impact of COVID-19 on women, in urban regions, and that is okay. But you can also now look at the impact of COVID-19 on women who from the marginalized communities, or women who are disabled. Maybe they are blind, So it doesn't mean that because somebody has looked at a study that is looking at the impact of COVID-19 on women, that you may not extend that kind of a research. You can extend it and look at different group of women in the society. The options are many, and the reason why they become many is because you have reviewed literature and you can be able to tell what has not been done, or what scholars have not given enough attention. Number 6 is to confirm the researchability of the research question and ensure avoidance of insignificance or trivial research. Now, this is very important. Sometimes when we are thinking about our research problems, we are so much convinced that this is doable, this is one of the best research, this is, this is the game changer in the world of research, only to face your supervisor or the thesis committee and they tell you, my friend, that one cannot even be done, it's not researchable. Or so what is the value of that? Yes, you have a problem, so what is the value of that? So to avoid actually getting in this kind of a trap, please review literature, and you're going to get to know what kind of studies are not researchable, and which some of the studies that sound good, but the impact of those studies or the implication of the findings will be insignificant or trivial. Then finally is the purposes that identify areas for advancing the scholarship in the field. Now, this kind of this particular purpose will help you. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's the first part that is repeated. You can see that number 1 is repeated. However, you can start from number 2 when it comes to advancing scholarship, is to establish the significance of your investigation by establishing the importance of the research issue of the issue your research is addressing. The basic thing here is establishing the significance of your research. Now you can also review literature to point out gaps in existing research. I said you're not the first one, and you can do that, a lot of literature review to establish the gaps existing in research. Number 4, you can also do review to demonstrate how your research is linked to the studies reviewed and also the existing body of knowledge. And finally, you can do review to indicate how your research revises, extends, or refine the understanding and knowledge of the topic. How does your study, or research revise or extend or refine the understanding and knowledge, of the topic? So these are 3 purposes that can drive your objective or your intention of doing literature review. Within those purposes, you can pick 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever number of ideas that can guide you when you're doing your literature review. Now, there are some questions that we basically ask when we are doing literature review. And these questions may actually help you or guide you in doing the literature review. For instance, it would be important to ask yourself questions like, what are the key theories or concepts and ideas? When you are going through this literature, you need to understand what are the key concepts. So you can be asking yourself, what are the key theories and concepts and ideas, very similar to what I've been talking about on the purposes. What are the epistemological or ontological grounds for the discipline? If you are dealing with a topic like stigma, you may want to ask yourself, what is the nature of knowledge or epistemological, and what is the nature of reality? How do people view some of these social psychological aspects? Then the other question may be, what are the main questions and problems that have been addressed to date? People have been researching that area. So what have they researched? What have they been talking about? And what have they not given a lot of attention? Another question can be, how is knowledge on the topic structured and organized? That would be interesting to understand the structures or how the knowledge in a certain area is structured or even organized. Then another one would be, what are the origins and definition of topics? Maybe somebody who is doing religious topic on religion or faith, they may be interested about the origin and definition of certain topics or even terms. And if it is political standpoints, very closely related to philosophical standpoints, is somebody discussing this issue from a feminism point of view or from what point of view? Some of the standpoints that we hold are both philosophical as well as political. So where is the author coming from when they're discussing whatever they're discussing and whatever you're reviewing? And others are, what are the major issues and debates allowed the topic, and what are the key sources? Where will you get your material from? All right, so we shall be able to answer some of these questions, and some of them we may not be able to look at them, but by the end of the class, it will be clear how you can answer most of these questions.